Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to go over 3 more disturbing VHS segments. This horror series is a great source for creative and skin-crawling stories, and is a great example of modern gore and horror. But that isn't all. I have a very special guest presenting one of the segments. I know he and I share a lot of fans, and I'm excited to have worked with him. But with all that out of the way, let's get to the spooky and gory stories. Our first segment is called The Storm Drain. From VHS 94, which originally released on October 6, 2021, the story opens on Channel 6 news anchors Mark and Camille as they joke about the rising cost of internet services. They call it a quickly dying fad, before Camille begins to talk about a local urban legend called the Ratman, saying that many residents have been sharing stories of numerous recent sightings. Mark continues to say that the urban legend says Ratman is a man and animal hybrid and only seems to come out at night, and suddenly disappears if a light is shined in its direction. Mark says it sounds like a superhero origin story, but Camille cringes and says it sounds like a superhero that she'd never want to meet. They then cut to B-roll, and a voiceover begins from Holly Marciano, an investigative reporter for the station. She interviews local residents who've claimed to have encountered the mysterious Ratman. One man says he was out for a walk one night and heard some strange sounds coming from the sewers, and that it looked up at him from the grate while making a tongue-in-cheek joke about a certain Stephen King character.
You're that fucking clown.
Holly then shows a child sketch of the infamous Ratman, saying that this is what many residents agree the creature looks like. Next, she interviews 2 teens who claim they heard that the Ratman was an escaped mental patient who was experimented on, claiming that something similar happened to a cousin of his. Following this is an interview with a local priest who believes the Ratman is a sign from God, saying that he believes it's time for criminals and elitists to repent, ominously warning that the Ratman is a harbinger for the end of times. Then a man fishing on the banks points out exactly where he claims to have seen the Ratman, pointing his rifle at a floodwater outlet. His overcomfort with the rifle causes Holly to cut the interview short. The cameraman, Jeff, and her walk back to the news van. Jeff tries to take more B-roll as Holly talks with the station boss, telling her that the segment got a positive response and that he wants them to enter the mouth of the water outlet and see if they can capture the Ratman on film, something Holly protests. But the station heads tell her to do it anyway. She hangs up the radio in a huff. She continues filming an opening in her attempt to capture the Ratman on film. She is uncomfortable and believes she's surrounded by human waste, but Jeff tries to comfort her, saying that it's stormwater, not sewage. Holly ignores that so she can continue to complain. She continues on with the opening, but a monstrous screech from the darkness cuts off her final word. Her body locks up in tension as she slowly turns around to see what made the sound, but the long tunnel is too dark to reveal whatever it was that made the terrifying noise. She looks back at Jeff and says it was construction in an attempt to sidestep her fears. They begin their second attempt to film their scene in the mouth of the water outlet. But this time, Jeff notices something in the background inside the tunnel, so he goes to check it out. He flicks on his camera's light to see a sleeping bag that appears to have someone inside. Jeff calls out to the person, but his voice is hardly heard over the rushing water around them. He cautiously lifts the corner of the blanket and notices that it's not filled with a person but a bunch of random items. Holly notices the little teddy bear and asks Jeff if he thinks there are kids living down here. Jeff takes a deep breath over the loaded question and says that it's possible. She says that it's shameful before walking past Jeff toward the tunnel, believing that a child might be living down there alone. She turns to Jeff, saying that she wants him to keep recording. Her idea is noble, and says that if she can capture on film what it's like living down here, then maybe more people would be willing to help. Deeper in the tunnel, Jeff films some strange hand and footprints as if something was walking around on all fours. He continues to follow Holly with a dim camera light, filming abandoned bags and shopping carts filled with various items. Suddenly, Holly stops in her tracks. Jeff asks what she's doing, but Holly shushes him. Jeff rounds the corner and sees a dark figure standing there. They take one step in its direction before it slowly turns and walks off into the darkness. Jeff turns around to look at Holly and asks who she thinks that was. She shrugs her shoulders and Jeff notices the small encampment behind her. He says that it must be where that dark figure lives. Holly orders Jeff to get it on camera. Jeff cautiously moves in and films some cooking pots and pans, a makeshift bed, and various survival items in the crudely constructed tent. But what catches his attention is a yellow box covered in black slime and ooze. He slowly pans to the right and sees a pair of eyes open in the dark. The sudden sight makes Jeff scream out in fear. He drops the camera and quickly retreats backwards in fright. But Holly reins him in as the mystery figure darts past the camera. Holly tries to calm him down and tells him to keep recording. They slowly and cautiously approach the crouching man. Holly asks him softly if she can ask him questions. The man nods. Holly asks him what his name is, and he, very shakily, responds, "Bill." Holly asks if there are any other people living down here. He whispers, "Ratma." Holly asks if he's the Rat Man. As Jeff slowly zooms in on the man's face, he creepily smiles as thick black ooze drips from his mouth. Holly and Jeff back away in shock as the man continues to smile and leer at them. They both turn and run. Jeff reaches the final corner before the exit, but turns back to notice that Holly isn't behind him anymore. He calls out her name, but only a monstrous yell echoes off the walls. Jeff hears a sound and turns the camera to face it before a different ooze-covered man attacks him. The camera abruptly cuts off. But when the camera comes back on, it's glitchy and distorted. When it clears up, we see that Holly is waking up from being knocked out. With makeshift bindings tied around her hands, she stands up, shaking. It's clear Jeff isn't the one behind the camera anymore. She sees multiple people surrounding her in the dark. Panic sets in, and she says that she means no harm and only wants to help them. Suddenly, a voice echoes through the black around them. Holly's breathing hitches as the pastor coldly asks her how she intends to help them. Holly says that she wants to tell their story. The pastor shakes his head, saying that they'll tell their own story. He walks away into the darkness, revealing Jeff, who has passed out. The ooze-covered peoples lift Jeff on his feet, and as the pastor turns away, him and Holly call to each other in the darkness. They force Jeff to his knees on the ground at the end of the pipe. The camera turns and is now facing the pastor, who's talking to whoever's holding the camera, and tells them to turn the light off, as it might spook their new impromptu god. In the darkness, we get the first glimpse of Ratma as the pastor coaxes the creature out of the pipe. It's then that we get the first good look at the hideous creature. It's humanoid, but with sparse matted hair, with a face tightly pulled over a long skull, a wide mouth which looks unnaturally human and rat-like. It let out a loud, shrill screech as it slowly reveals more of itself to the camera and the pastor. It vomits a black, viscous ooze into a cup which the pastor collected. The pastor calmly moves towards Jeff, then loudly exclaims it's being done in the name of Ratma, and pours the ooze all over Jeff, causing him to let out an agonizing cry as it covers his face. Small puffs of dark smoke and steam rise from the oozing black sludge. Holly screams in horror as the pastor moves towards her, before the pastor begins a long monologue about a new era and how only those he deems worthy would survive. He goes on to say how Jeff wasn't worthy in the eyes of the new god, but Holly might be deemed worthy of serving in their new world order. She's forced to her knees, and the pastor takes the camera. The hideous abomination slowly moves its face closer to hers, screeching loudly in her face. Thick black viscous ooze dribbles from its large mouth, and the ooze slowly drips down onto her skin. The camera begins to cut out as she screams in horror. The news segment opens with Anchorman Mark talking about how Holly has been rescued from the storm drain. He goes over the details of her ordeal and the fact that cameraman Jeff is still missing. It's revealed that Holly has not only recovered from the ordeal, but is sitting next to Mark for the news segment. Holly continues to introduce the next segment with a smile, but like Mark Lar aliens from South Park, Holly starts renaming all people, places, and things. Ratma. Mark tries to cut in and save the transition, as black ooze begins to drip from Holly's mouth. She then turns and projectile vomits the steaming black gunk onto Mark's face. He screams out in pain, and ends up looking like a gruesome colorized version of the monsters from They Live.
You're okay. This one, real fucking ugly. Oh.
Polly turns to the camera and with a smile on her face, says two haunting words before the screen cuts out and fades to black.
Hail, Ratma.
When it comes to the story of Storm Drain, it was written and directed by Chloe Okuno, and this segment actually helped put her on the map before she went on to direct the movie Watcher. And you can already see her unique style on display here, especially in the way she builds tension slowly before dropping everything into chaos. The whole segment starts grounded in reality with a news report, and then gradually pulls you deeper into something much darker. The idea for Storm Drain pulls heavily from urban legends and how they spread through communities, especially when amplified by local news. It also plays on the idea of certain groups of people being ignored or forgotten, and twists that into something horrifying. There are also clear influences from films like Chuds and Candyman, both of which deal with underground horror and legends that grow through fear and storytelling. Even though the setting looks real, the sewer system wasn't actually filmed in a real storm drain. Most of it was built as a set so the crew could control lighting and camera movement while still making it feel tight, damp, and claustrophobic. That's why the footage feels so smooth even in such a dark, cramped space. The structure of the segment was also very intentional. It starts off like a typical local news investigation, which makes everything feel believable at first, but slowly shifts into full found footage horror, very reminiscent of the Blair Witch Project. And when it comes to the man in the suit who actually played the Ratma creature, it is widely rumored to be the legendary creature actor Doug Jones, but since the role is officially listed as uncredited, it's a hard thing to confirm. In the end, Storm Drain was a memorable segment due to its shocking gore and semi-realistic setup. On to our second segment with a special guest that I already spoiled in the thumbnail.
The next story we're taking a look at is Parallel Monsters from VHS Viral, the worst of the VHS movies. Parallel Monsters is the third segment in the movie and is probably the best the movie has to offer, and it's definitely the strangest and most disturbing out of all of them as well, which isn't saying a lot about a movie that has an evil magician and skateboarding snuff films, but you'll see why here in a bit. The segment starts with a guy who starts recording while his camera is facing a door. He hears some strange noises outside the door and he scrambles to cover up something off screen with a tarp. We quickly learn that the noises outside was just his wife and she's coming down to check on him because he's been working on his invention all night. She asks him to come to bed, but he's so close to being done, he just wants to finish it and then he'll join her in bed. Next we cut to a timestamp. It's August 16th, 2013 at 4:03 a.m. It's his third configuration of the machine and his first test. He turns the camera to the invention and uncovers it to reveal another doorway. When he activates the machine, a shutter door slams down, sealing the door shut, and lights start to peer in from the other side of the door. It looks like whatever he's trying to make is working, but he's so confident in his invention that he didn't even panic as things seemingly went well. And when the door finally opens, we see a mirror image of the room he's in right now. He successfully made a door to a parallel dimension where everything seems to be exactly the same. He also meets a parallel version of himself where we finally learn that his name is Alfonso. Both Alfonsos are over the moon that their invention actually worked, and they talk about the similarities in the world. For example, they're both married to a woman named Marta. Then the two decide to swap dimensions for just 15 minutes because, I mean, they just invented a dimensional door. Of course they're going to want to explore a little bit. I think it'd be a little more weird if they didn't want to explore. Now things get a bit confusing here because they're going from dimension to dimension. So to make things a bit easier, I'm going to call the people that we met first Alfonso 1 and Marta 1, and the other dimension people Alfonso and Marta 2. Simple enough, hopefully. And before they split up, Alfonso 1 warns Alfonso 2 to be careful and not wake Marta 1 up, which he promises not to do. We follow Alfonso 1 as he walks up the stairs, logging everything like a scientist would into his camera. And as he says everything in the house seems the same, he finds a picture of what looks like a seance hanging where a picture of him and his wife would be hanging in his dimension. Both Alfonsos find their discoveries pretty odd, but nevertheless they trek on through the house. Alfonso 1 opens the door to hear someone having a bit too much fun on their TV, and he accidentally scares Marta 2, who's grabbing some champagne from the fridge because they have a little celebration tonight. She guides Alfonso 1 outside where we meet a half-naked dude named Oriole, and another half-naked dude comes out of the shadows who's also named Oriole. Do I have that right? Okay, well, while something strange is happening in that dimension, in the other dimension, Alfonso 2 is sneakily walking through the house and he goes straight to the bedroom where Marta 1 is sleeping. Unable to tell the difference in her husband, Marta 1 tells Alfonso 2 to join her in bed, but instead he just sets the camera down on the nightstand beside her. Back in the other dimension, the group go into the living room where Alfonso 1 finds the exact same seance setup as the picture he found before. And although the TV sounds like it's blasting porn, on the screen is just horrifying satanic images, and on the ceiling is a projection of the stars. Alfonso 1 nervously notes all these things as he quickly learns that this dimension is nothing like he expected. Marta 2 offers Alfonso 1 take a seat and tells the Orioles that her husband likes to go first and gives him the floor to do something. But before he can do anything, we cut back to the normal dimension where Alfonso 2 is taking creep shots of Marta as she sleeps. I'm not sure if it's for scientific reasons or for his spank bank later, but it's literally the same woman that's your wife in your own dimension. So maybe he just likes being a creep? Back in the other dimension, Alfonso 1 doesn't exactly know what to do with this meatbag, so he doesn't do or say anything, and it makes the Orioles feel awkward and unwelcome. So they take it as a hint for them to leave, with Marta 2 trying her best to stop them. Outside, there are loud blaring noises that gain Alfonso 1's attention and keeps him distracted as a pissed Marta 2 comes back inside. He tries his best to nonchalantly ask about the sound, but she doesn't give him a straightforward answer, because obviously he should know what that sound is. He's lived here his entire life. She does take this time to air out some of her grievances in their relationship. Alfonso 2 has been working so much and for so long that he's oblivious to the outside world. And poor Alfonso 1 accidentally walked in on the only night they would have to do this seance thing, and he accidentally messed it all up. He also accidentally pissed Marta 2 off because she's actually been looking forward to the ritual. And now that it's ruined, she feels like Alfonso doesn't care about her feelings at all, which she kinda does it right now. He's more scared of the bloody sack in the living room and the blaring noises and flashing lights that are coming from outside. He actually interrupts Marta 2 while she's talking to grab his camera and go outside to see what this noise is. And when he gets outside, he finds a blimp with huge speakers chanting a prayer of some sort, while a large neon pink upside down cross glows on the side of it. While outside, he runs into the Orioles again and they ask if he's okay. They also ask if he's changed his mind and they want to go back inside to continue the ritual. And while Alfonso 1 is interrogated by the Orioles, in the other dimension, Alfonso 2 starts to reveal his true intentions with Marta 1. His eyes and mouth glow as he begins to touch himself while watching her sleep. Mysteriously, now the Orioles have an issue with Alfonso 1 filming them. Sensing that he's in danger, Alfonso 1 tries to make a run for it, but they chase him down, and now their eyes and mouth are glowing just like Alfonso 2. Their voices have also changed. It's deeper and more demonic now. Alfonso 1 once again tries to run away, terrified, and he drops his camera. Luckily, Oriole decides to continue to film for him. Back in the good dimension, Alfonso 2 puts his phone away and moves the camera to where we can see a sleeping Marta. Then he slowly takes off his pants to reveal he has a special, friend down there. Or should I say a horrifying friend down there. Back in the other dimension, Alfonso 1 gets cornered and trapped to a tree, and in a mirrored shot from his wife, he also gets attacked by the friend of an Oriole. Luckily, he has a screwdriver in his shirt pocket from working earlier, and he stabs Oriole's friend, making him cry out in pain. While at the same time, Marta 1 wakes up to the terrifying creature just inches from her face.
That's what she said!
Alfonso 1 manages to grab the camera and get away from them before anything bad can happen to him. He makes it back inside and is confronted by Marta 2 on his way back to the dimensional doorway. She confronts him about the blood on his clothes and all the racket she heard outside, and she gets the sense that maybe Alfonso wanted the two guys for himself, and she tells him that if he wanted to have them all to himself, then he should have just told her that. Which I'm not sure if that means they planned on killing the two guys or if they had something else planned, but she does like that he got it all on video. Actually, she really likes that he got it all on video. She unties her robe to reveal she too has a disgustingly horrifying monster attached to her body. Alfonso tries to play it cool as he slowly approaches her and throws her out of the way so he can get back home. But he doesn't get very far before she stops him again, so he's forced to use plan B, and then put the clip of him punching her in the face because that shit's hilarious. Finally, he runs back to his dimension and runs into Alfonso 2, who is also covered in blood. He asks him repeatedly, "What did you do to Marta?" But Alfonso 2 never gives him an answer. He just stabs Alfonso 1 and heads back into his own dimension, where Marta 2 is waiting to devour him on the other side, because Alfonso 1 accidentally broke a law that allows one partner to kill the other if there's domestic violence at home, which is a crazy law and probably one that's really hard to argue in court. Then Alfonso 2's face is eaten off by her friend, I guess that's what I'll keep calling it. Finally, Alfonso 1 closes the portal door, and we see from the other camera that he was only stabbed in the leg. He calls out to Marta to help him, but when she comes downstairs, she doesn't plan to help him at all. She's covered in blood, probably from Alfonso 2's friend, and instead of helping him, she repeatedly stabs her husband, thinking that he is still the monster that was just in her house. And that's where the segment ends. Like I said, it's a very weird segment, but just weird enough to downright disturb and appall you. Parallel Monster was written and directed by Nacho Vigalondo, who has a good portfolio of both horror and comedic movies, which both kind of stand out in this segment. He did a great job of adding an interesting and crazy story to a very boring and lame movie, let's be honest. And if you like really dry and awkward humor, you will definitely like this segment. Gustavo Salmeron played Alfonso, and he also did a great job. Playing two roles is never easy, and he made it seem like it was nothing. You can actually feel the fear that Alfonso 1 was feeling while in the parallel dimension, even when he wasn't on camera. And when he was on camera, he was constantly looking around, nervously rubbing his hands together, just overall super anxious and scared about the situation that he got himself in. While the other Alfonso just seemed more predatory. He confidently snuck throughout the house, he took creepy pictures of Marta, and he was even so bold to whip out his monster right in front of her. Even though the segment was very strange and a little disgusting, I do like how bold the segment was. It was trying to do something new and horrific, and I mean, monstrous genitals is the craziest twist I think VHS has had. Still, even to this day, I think this is the craziest twist I've seen. I appreciate the creativity in trying to make something memorable, because Lord knows you had success in that. I also like how the segment takes its time. It gives the viewer a while to try and figure out what exactly is going on, and by the end, it's pretty obvious that there's some kind of Satanist in the other dimension. But when he first goes into the dimension, you kind of get the vibe that something else is gonna go down, if you know what I mean. Then they go into the living room where there's a huge sack of meat in a bag and porn noises playing in the background while a body decomposes on your TV. And then you realize you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And even after it ends, you're still kind of confused about what's going on. Also, how does this play in the viral theme of the rest of the movie? Did somebody post this online afterwards? Overall, it's not a bad segment. It's definitely one that will gross you out and leave you feeling really disturbed for a few days after you see it. And whether you think it was just intended for that to be disturbing and gross, or if you think it's some sort of allegory for sexual abuse, let us know in the comments below. And thank you, Buzby, for letting me be a part of this video.
The next story is titled The Empty Wake. Our story starts off, as the title implies, at an empty wake, all except for Ronald, the funeral director, and his assistant, Haley, who is having trouble understanding why someone would want to film a wake. He explains that all families are different, and some like to hold on to everything after someone dies, including their final moments above ground. He continues by saying that it's their job to give grieving families what they want. Still weirded out by the idea, she asks for more money for having to film on top of everything else she normally does. A third member of the team, Tim, comes out from the back, asking if they're ready to go. Ron says he is while running through the final details with her. Scratching his head, Tim asks who moved the coffin. Noticing it's sitting slanted, everyone denies touching it, but Ron assumes he must have bumped it and crouches down to straighten it out. Tim jokes about the deceased being a big guy, adding a cocky remark about how what was left of him was heavy. Uneasy about being left alone for the final service of the night, she asks if he's joking. Ron shakes his head and explains that the deceased, Andrew, was in a severe accident, reminding her that it must remain a closed casket wake. Tim adds a dark joke, saying he was more or less able to get him back into shape. He explains it was the family's request to have the body put back together, but admits the head and face were too damaged to do much with. He jokes that the man won't be winning any beauty pageants, but insists he did the best he could. The discomfort is obvious in her expression and body language. As one last jab, he tells her she can always open the lid and take a look herself. Before she can respond, Ron cuts in, reassuring her that she'll do great and not to let that get under her skin. He reminds her he'll be in early in the morning and to call if there's an emergency. Hours pass, long enough that she has to swap out the tapes in the camcorders. She calls Ron, asking if she really needs to keep recording if nobody shows up. He reminds her she's only supposed to call for emergencies, and that no one attending doesn't count. Maybe the family got caught in the storm, or maybe the guy just wasn't well liked. She hangs up and more time drags on. She flips through a magazine and calls the local newspaper to confirm the name and time of the wake, asking for a callback. After a while, the isolation gets to her, and the professionalism starts to slip. As the storm intensifies and the lights begin to flicker, she swaps batteries and tapes again. She questions why anyone would want an overnight wake, but admits it's the easiest money she's ever made. Moving from spot to spot, she reads to pass the time. At one point, she swears she hears movement in the casket, but the ringing phone startles her. She rushes to answer it. It's Sharon, a friend who helps run the local paper. She asks if Sharon can check recent obituaries for an Andrew Edwards, mentioning how strange it is that no one has shown up. Sharon agrees to call back. More time passes as the storm worsens. Late into the night, the power finally goes out. Left in complete darkness, panic starts to creep in. She grabs one of the cameras, turns on its light, and stumbles toward the utility closet for candles. As if mocking her, the power returns the moment they're lit. Heading back into the viewing area, she notices the coffin is crooked again. Setting the camera down, she walks over and knocks on it. Nothing. As she starts to push it back into place, a sharp knock comes from inside. She stumbles back in terror, knocking over chairs and falling. She calls Tim, explaining what happened. He's skeptical and warns that if she can't handle a quiet wake, this might not be the job for her. After a moment, he softens a bit, acknowledging how unsettling it can be to be alone in a place like that during a storm. Still, he insists the dead coming back is nothing but urban legend. He reassures her that the man in the coffin is absolutely dead, even suggesting she check for herself. She reluctantly agrees, convincing herself it's just nerves. Before hanging up, he half jokes that calling Ron again might get her fired. She laughs it off and ends the call, then approaches the coffin, trying to build the courage to touch it. She taps the lid and quickly steps back. Another tap, this time 2 knocks answer. She jumps, only to realize they didn't come from the coffin, but from the front door. She leaves the camera's view and returns with an older man named Gus, who apologizes for being late due to the storm, mentioning a tornado watch. That could explain why no one else has shown up. He asks about Ron, and she explains he'll return in the morning, leaving her as the only staff present. He nods and asks to pay his respects. She offers him a seat in a program, asking if he's family, but he ignores the question and begins speaking to the deceased in another language. She steps away to give him privacy. After finishing, he leaves just as quickly as he arrived. When she asks if he needs anything else, he simply says he came to pay his respects. She watches him drive off into the storm. Later, Sharon calls back, apologizing for the delay. She brushes it off, mentioning that at least one person showed up. Sharon seems oddly focused on that and asks if the visitor seems strange. When she asks why, Sharon reveals she didn't need to check the obituaries. Andrew Edwards was front page news. He had climbed onto a church roof and, in front of his family, began speaking gibberish for nearly an hour before, voluntarily falling off. And yes, I gotta say voluntarily fell because YouTube has rules that suck, but right as this is revealed, the power cuts out again, plunging everything into complete darkness. She calls out, but the line is dead. Turning the camera light back on, she slowly approaches the coffin. A knock comes from inside, followed by a violent pound that knocks a picture frame off the top. She runs. She sprints for the exit, only to find the doors chained shut. Since Gus came and went freely, it's clear he must have chained them on his way out. Slowly, she returns to the viewing room. The coffin is now open, knocked off its stand, and worst of all, the body is gone. Tornado sirens wail in the distance as she nervously calls out, hoping for no response. Panning the camera across the room, she spots the corpse standing upright, what remains of its face pressed against the wall. Trying to stay calm, she speaks to it, insisting there's been a mistake, that it isn't dead. Then it turns, and you see why it's been called a corpse this whole time. She screams. It reacts, seemingly blind, tracking her by sound. She flicks the camera light on and off, confirming it can't see. Carefully, she sidesteps, trying to escape, as its hand suddenly drops off. She freezes, then notices the severed hand moving on its own. That's when she screams again. It lunges toward the sound. She barely slips past as the body continues falling apart. Looking down, she sees half of its head on the floor. One eye stares out into the darkness, then locks directly onto her. Apparently that head has better Wi-Fi than my phone company, because the rest of the body suddenly knows exactly where she is and attacks. The camera crashes to the floor, wind howls, sirens blare. Screams mix with wet, gnawing sounds as debris from the tornado tears into the building. Cut to the backup camera, tilted, barely holding the scene together. The corpse lies motionless again. She stumbles into frame. For a moment, it looks like she made it out alive. Then she looks down at her mangled hands and begins to move like the thing that attacked her. She staggers toward the window and disappears into the storm as the screen fades to black. When it comes to the story of the empty wake, a lot of what makes it feel so real actually comes down to how it was filmed. Unlike the other segments, this one relies heavily on multiple fixed cameras placed around the funeral home, instead of having the camera follow the characters. The storm outside isn't just there for atmosphere either. It plays a big role in the filming itself. The thunder, lightning, and power flickers help hide cuts, build suspense, and keep the scene visually interesting without needing constant action. What feels like chaos on screen is actually a very controlled tool, used to make the discomfort linger. A big part of the horror also comes from the corpse itself, which was created using practical effects over CGI. The damaged head and close-up shots were all done with makeup and prosthetics, meaning actor Devon Cheong had to sit through long application times just to bring that body to life, even though he's never fully seen in the segment. And when things finally go off the rails at the end, that destruction is more practical than it looks. The chaos was created using controlled effects like air cannons to blast debris and sugar glass to simulate the force of the storm. So, while it looks completely out of control, it's actually carefully choreographed. Actor Kyle Legend, who played Haley, said that the effects of the storm and the empty funeral home were actually just as creepy on set. Because of the COVID filming restrictions and the way the cameras were set up, the crew mostly stayed out of her sight during filming. In fact, it wasn't until the final standoff with the corpse that the crew became more visible, mainly for safety reasons. Overall, I find the segment creepy, with just the right amount of scares. The only gripe I have is the same issue I have with most VHS segments, and that's that they end just as they start to get really good. A lot of the stronger segments follow that, leave them wanting more approach, but sometimes it feels like we're missing the most interesting part. For instance, in this story, it's unclear if the walking corpse is a zombie or some kind of demon that possessed the body and then passed itself on to Haley. To avoid being buried, some people might say the mystery is what makes it creepy, but in cases like this, I don't think it necessarily makes the story better. But that's all I have for this one. I want to say a special thank you to our channel members and everyone who takes the time to watch these videos. I also want to give a big shout out to our guest, Kingnusmi. If you've never seen his content, I highly recommend checking him out. And he and I share a lot of the same taste in horror. He covers shows like Goosebumps, The Haunting Hour, and even Tales from the Crypt from time to time, all with his signature upbeat humor. Check him out if you haven't already. He's a really good dude who makes great content. But with all that said, have a great week, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.